Tim, the most common argument in favor of privatization and contractors is that the private sector does the job more efficiently. But if you look at these numbers, that clearly isn't the case. Why is that argument still so pervasive, and why hasn't the federal government done anything to rein in their costs?
Well, the private sector in a number of fields dictates policy in Washington. That's probably not a surprise to someone who's been covering the telecommunications sector or someone who's been covering the energy sector. The town is awash with lobbyists who twist arms at Congress, twist arms in the White House, and twist arms across the city to see that a lot of this taxpayer money goes to, in their view, the right place. And what we've created is this vast security industry that operates beyond the reach of government accountability, even though its main source of income comes from taxpayers like you and me.
And they're able to influence the funding of that by influencing Congress. What's interesting to me is the stability of federal government intelligence worker employment numbers compared to private sector ones. Has the private sector just totally replaced the government when it comes to important intelligence work, or become like a giant, abscess attached to it?
Well, I mean, I've seen indications that the largest portion of the NSA budget goes to the private sector. And then part of that's because a lot of the most talented engineers and developers, computer developers, don't want to take jobs in government. They would rather work in the private sector where they can make a lot more money. So the government goes, or in this case, the NSA goes where the expertise is, and that's in the private sector. But the problem is that, nothing good can come from mixing the sort of profit motive with government secrecy. It will lead to a state of perpetual secrecy and surveillance in the United States, because these companies, a lot of them are public companies, want to, like any public company, they want to continue to record profits. They want to continue to bring in revenue. And so it's good for them to maintain this sort of privately run surveillance state. And because they have so much power in Washington, that's exactly what they're doing.
Under current law, intelligence contractors are exempt from whistleblower laws. Could it be that this loophole is encouraging the growth of the corporate national security apparatus?
Certainly, I think you'll know that Snowden signed an agreement with his employer, Booz Allen, that he would not disclose this information. So there is a greater ability to control leakers, or at least that was the thought, by going through these private companies. And it's not just Booz Allen, Hamilton. There are companies like Northrop Grumman, there's Raytheon, and there's a whole other sector on the tech side too that is selling surveillance technology. They may not be contracting employers, but they're actually licensing technology that's used to spy on individuals. There's a company like Narus, which is owned by Boeing, which has provided the NSA with most of its ability to tap telephone lines and to search emails in real time. And I think folks may remember back in 2005 and 2006, there was a whistleblower that found that the AT&T in San Francisco was working with the NSA to listen to overseas phone calls. And all of that technology that the AT&T was using was provided by Narus, which again is this Boeing-owned company that has a massive contract to provide surveillance technology to the NSA.
Why do a disproportionate number of these contractors have top secret clearances as opposed to the ones with just secret clearances?
Well, the nature of the technology that they're using, oftentimes it's a technology that's called deep packet inspection technology that's very complex in the way that it can sort through millions of emails in a very short time, and it requires highly trained technicians not only to install it in some of these listening centers, but to also run the technology. So, and again, these technicians aren't going to government jobs. They're working in the private sector. And so the clearance goes to where they are. And again, as you mentioned, there's not as much oversight in terms of protections for whistleblowing, or there's not much oversight in the sorts of abuses that they may be involved with. Edward Snowden mentioned that he had the ability to sift through the online communications of almost anyone. So, this type of clearance gives them incredible power to look into the private lives of almost every person.
The data about access to confidential information that we have, comes from the office of the Director of National Intelligence. How can there be such things as someone with access to confidential information whose employment status is, quote, unknown?
It's a good question, and it's one of those questions, unfortunately, that we do not know the answer to. One of the problems that we're facing here is not only privacy from the private security state, but a lot of secrecy from the overseers, the various members of Congress, whether it be through the Senate Intelligence Committee or other agencies that are supposed to provide some oversight as to how all of the surveillance is managed and how all these companies are managed, are not giving out that information to the public. So one of the things that Free Press, my organization, we're working with a number of other groups like the ACLU and the EFF and a lot of these groups that have been working on digital rights issues, are trying to call Congress to give a full accounting of the extent of the spying, and also to have public hearings into our surveillance states, so that we, the people who are being spied on could see the full extent.
I mean, to use the language of spying, wouldn't it be accurate to say that essentially our government, national security apparatus, our national security commons, has been infiltrated and is now largely controlled by a variety of non-governmental industries, or entities, these industries, that really, their prime motive is profit, not what's best for the United States of America. And if so, is it too late to wrest back control of our national security systems to the federal government? We have just a minute left here.
Well, I mean, I think what they're interested in is creating a perpetual state of war, so that there is always a need for their services. I don't think it's too late. I think we had a problem with overreach by the CIA and the intelligence agencies at the end of the war. There was a church committee which was convened in the 1970s, so I meant the end of the Vietnam War, that looked into intelligence practices and made some corrections. We need another church committee to look into intelligence agencies operating today and see whether our rights are being fully protected.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm guessing that the guy to lead it up would probably be Ron Wyden or Senator Udall. Timothy Karr, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great having you with us.